All right, let's go ahead and get started. So, just to recap what we were talking about on Wednesday of last week, our last class session, because we have Monday off for Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And Martin Luther King Jr. Day has some pretty important presence in the field of historic and cultural interpretation. Not so much environmental, but I don't want to pass by Monday without realizing its importance to this class. And we were talking last Wednesday about things that are important to you. We ended up calling these things topics. And it's just like a name of something, a phrase, it could be a person, place, or thing, any kind of phenomenon. Basically any noun or noun phrase could be your topic. And it's just something you enjoy, or something that you feel matters. It's important. More whether or not you enjoy it, you feel like it matters. It's important. Okay? And then we kind of finished up talking about how a topic by itself is very specific person to person, but asking the question, why do I think this topic, among the billion things I could be fascinated with, or in love with, or pay a lot of attention to, or spend a lot of time, or money, or focus, or energy on, why is that important to me? Is our entree to figuring out how can I have important conversations with other people as a forester, maybe even lots of people even all at once, when working professionally in forestry on the human-facing side of stuff, specifically in interpretation. So identifying why that's important to you and how that reason for importance, that value, might also speak to somebody else. Maybe they don't care about the particular Pokemon character that you absolutely are crazy about, and you've been chasing foil cards for that one for your deck forever. And that person doesn't like or care about Mewtwo, but maybe they care about Squirtle. And the reason is the same, even if the Pokemon is different. We go from specific and individual in a topic to universal through the values. And so what we want to do all semester long and professionally throughout your career in Interp, you want to identify topics that are relevant at a place, like a national park, like we're going to Mammoth Cave, for example. We've got an interpretive card game called Edge of Extinction. This particular deck is themed all around Mammoth Cave, so just take half the deck, take a look at some of the cards, pass them around, hang on to a few cards each for the duration of the class, pass them back at the end, just to kind of see what some of these topics are, some of these species in this case, are in Mammoth Cave. And whether or not you know anything about a hog-nosed bat, or a little brown bat, or what have you, maybe you don't really think a lot about hog-nosed bats, or little brown bats, or whatever, because you don't see any value to them. And that's okay if you don't. We're not born knowing all of the species. We as a species don't know what all of the species are yet, right? We're still cataloging stuff from places like the Amazon basin and so forth. Okay? But interpretation is kind of like the one big chance that we have as a society, as a culture, Western culture, American society, to introduce folks to stuff that we think might be pretty important. In this case, at Mammoth Cave, functionally and effectively and affordably preserving healthy species and healthy cave ecosystems. I think that's pretty important, but not everybody does. Most people, once they learn about the fragility and the uniqueness of the Mammoth Cave ecosystem, they start to see the value in doing that hard work of forestry and ecosystem restoration and wildlife management and so forth. But they only see that value after they start to encounter it through interpretation. Okay? So, we kind of defined what interpretation was last week and started to think about what might be some important topics to us. And we had got through 3 or 4 different rules for the purposes of this class in taking topics that are important to you, recognizing the value underlying them or driving those topics' interests for you, to turn those things into themes that are more accessible to anybody else, and anybody can see the importance of what you're getting at whether or not they understand the specific of the topic as you do. Okay? And in putting together this list, it's about 7 rules that we'll go through all semester long. We'll use them until we're sick of them. There's a guy named Freeman Tilden. I mentioned his name before last week. He was the guy who helped kind of write the playbook on how to do interpretation, how to identify topics, and much more importantly, how to take those identified topics and make them universally interesting and accessible and valuable to others. Okay? And it's not a process of working out a classroom curriculum and shoving a bunch of factoids around your topic down people's throats so they go, I see the light. Please stop talking. My brain's full. I have to leave. And so forth. It is helping folks encounter the thing, the species in this case, or the cultural topic like Martin Luther King Jr. and what the civil rights movement was like in the United States 60 years ago, and so forth. This guy, Freeman Tilden, wrote the book, the first book, it's a really good book, on how to do this. And he had identified 6 principles that kind of map onto our 7 rules for taking a topic and turning it into a theme and not wasting people's time. So, first principle. And then we'll get back into going through the remaining rules and start getting into some more interactive stuff instead of me talking at you. So, first principle that guides our rules. Any interpretation that doesn't somehow relate to what is being displayed, what is there right in front of you when you're in the cave, or described as something within the personality or the experience of the visitor, will be sterile. And sterile here is a bad thing. It's going to be useless. It's going to be a waste of time. It's going to be boring. Okay? Show of hands, whether or not it's me. How many of you guys and gals have had a class where the professor transferred a bunch of information to you, but you didn't feel anything about it? There was no sense of this is important, that's less important. It was just a bunch of knowledge transfer. Show of hands. Okay. That's not interpretation. That is education. Arguably not very good at education, but it's at least knowledge transfer. Okay? So interpretation, not the same as education. And this principle is kind of capturing the difference. If what is being displayed or described on site when you're on that cave tour, when you're looking at a colony of bats trying to survive in the cave, for example, if that colony of bats isn't mapped onto something that your random 3rd grader on the tour, your random 80-year-old on the tour, your random college-age student, whoever they are, male, female, skin color, background, ethnicity, all that stuff, if the bats can't have some clear connection or meaning or value that's recognizable in those people's experience, we've wasted everybody's time on that tour, and we put a lot of people in some degree of danger by marching them into one of the biggest cave systems in the world. Okay? So he's saying, don't have such a missile lock or target fixation on your topic that you can't see how it could be interesting or valuable to somebody else. You understand it. You already feel it's valuable. They don't even know what you're talking about. So it's got to be expressed in terms of some personal connection to your guests, your visitors, your participants, whoever you're working with that afternoon, that morning, whatever. Make sense? All right. So we're looking for anything that can translate out of that animal or that historic figure or that ecosystem or that place or that vista or whatever that maps onto something that people do already know, that everybody already knows. What's fundamentally recognizable about this thing beyond its specific identity? Second principle, information as such, factoids, information as such is not interpretation. If you've memorized the textbook of information about tree species and forestry or some of your other classes, that is knowledge. And if you transfer that knowledge to somebody else, that's education. But information as such is not interpretation. There's no sense of value. There's no sense of moral or ethical weight to it. There's no sense of the broader relevance to humanity and the lived human experience. But interpretation is revelation based on information. We're not making anything up. We are starting with all of the true and useful and interesting facts and finding what's worthy of revealing that collects those facts, that organizes them, that makes them important instead of just true. Information, education, knowledge transfer is entirely different than revealing value, revealing ethic, revealing human connection in interpretation. However, all interpretation does include, it starts with, your topic has a bunch of facts associated with it, and we want to know all of those facts as much as we can, and have a mastery of those facts so that we can be a virtuoso with that information and do something more with it than just teach. Okay? Third, interpretation is an art which combines many arts, whether the material presented are scientific, historical, or architectural. Any art is in some degree teachable. Okay. So, you don't have to raise your hand. I'm going to quote at you a general statistic, and it's up to you to decide, does that statistic make sense for me, or is my personal experience a little bit different than what Dr. Park is yapping about, as the Gen Alpha kids would say. How many of you worry about dying less than having to get up in front of a class or a bunch of strangers on like a guided hike, you're leading the hike? You worry about death less than public speaking? Raise your hand. A large majority of people, and this is true across cultures, across nation states and languages spoken and age and so forth, this is a common fundamental human characteristic apparently, because there's not a lot of research that says otherwise. There is a lot of research saying, yeah, this is true in this country, in this country, in this country, in this country, at this time, at that time, etc. A large majority of people are more afraid of public speaking than dying. Like they would rather die than have to get up and lead a guided hike. And Freeman Tilton says, in 1940 language, "Don't you worry, fam, I got you." This is an art form that combines many arts. And art here is like, not like painting necessarily. You could paint an interpretation if that makes sense. But it's also like language arts, like English and writing and speaking, stuff like that. It's just an art that combines many arts. All arts are in some degree teachable. So, you don't have to figure out how to do this. There's a century of professionals, the best people in the world, have gone before and invented that wheel for you, so you don't have to figure this stuff out. There are lots and lots and lots of ways to work through and past things like social anxiety. Now, we're not going to diagnose anybody here. We're not going to therapize anybody. We're not going to anything like that. Freeman Tilton says no. That's missing the point. Anybody, whether or not you have dyslexia, whether or not you have a speech impediment like stuttering or disfluency, anybody, even those folks, especially those folks, can learn how to do this at a highly effective and professional level. Because interpretation is lots of arts, not all of which involve getting up in front of a group and talking. You don't have to be good at that. You can learn to be very good at that, but nobody's born good at it. Okay? This is a very freeing thing. If you're worried about this class and any of our assignments and so forth, you have some options. You don't necessarily have to get up in front of everybody and
look like you know what you're talking about for an hour straight with a whole group of bored or confused classmates and one professor who's like making too much eye contact, whatever. You got other ways around it, other ways through it. Okay? Next principle. The chief aim of interpretation is not instruction. It's not knowledge transfer. It's provocation. It's to take all of us, wherever we are, as a public group of folks, all in the same spot, doing the same thing for an hour or 2 hours together in that interpretive experience or sight or whatever it is, and get nudged a little bit beyond what we're totally comfortable with because we're totally familiar with it. It's not yanking people outside of their comfort zone and making people uncomfortable in a negative way on purpose. It is saying, hey, I understand you are in a comfortable spot, and there's more that I can't wait for you to see. And after we do a little bit of interp around this thing, maybe that part's comfortable too now. And now your little circle of what you know and what you're comfortable with, what you've experienced and what you've survived through, that circle's a little bit bigger now. So a whole lot of interp that is gently and respectfully and ethically moving people to the edge of their comfort zone to encounter something not scary necessarily, but new and important, valuable. That's all. We're just talking about important, valuable stuff. So let's have more people functionally conversant with whatever's important. Next, interpretation should aim to present a whole rather than a part. The more expertise we develop on our forestry topics, or if your major is something else, whatever your major area of expertise as it's developing is, we tend to start to laser focus on that. In fact, each one of your professors with a PhD is a world-level expert on their specific topic. Relatively very few people in existence know as much as each of your professors about their specific area of expertise. And if you've ever been stuck in like office hours as they just sort of wax on about this thing that they care about and nobody else cares about, that's not a whole, it's a laser specific part. And so it's kind of boring or alienating to sit there and just listen to this person talk on and on. Okay? So instead, we explicitly want to aim to present a whole. What is that weirdly specific thing that you're super interested in? But what's also the context around it? What are the thousands of entry points to that more specific thing that matter to anybody else? And therefore, if we're going for the whole rather than the part, and it must address, the interp must address itself to the whole person rather than to any phase. Okay? So when we go to Mammoth Cave, there's stuff that is profoundly relevant for somebody who's 85 years old and who has lived a good, full life. There is also 1,000,001 awesome topics presented as themes for somebody who's 5 years old, 4 generations younger. Because we're not trying to just bulk out the laser specific part of the facts of the thing, we're addressing ourselves and the interpretation, more importantly, more accurately, to the entire person. What they know, what they think about what they know, how they feel about it, what's their social and cultural context around how they think about it, why do they think about the topic, the theme, the interp experience that way. The interp wants to speak to all of that. Okay? So, in this class, we're going to not just talk about things that are cool or funny or interesting or fascinating to each of us. We're also going to use interp as a society, and learn how to in this class, talk about some really hard things. Like, Martin Luther King Jr. Day was Monday. Is there any hard topics or difficult or maybe even uncomfortable conversations that
you ever heard around, this is a question for all of us, any hard conversations around the United States civil rights movement or era, 1950s, 60s, and 70s? Okay, see some nodding heads. What are some tough topics related to civil rights in the United States? Call them out. Let's just be real for a sec.
Violence.
Say again?
Violence against our own citizens.
Violence against U.S. citizens. Okay. What else? Good. Yeah. How certain civil rights figures have been presented, talked about, spun, propagandized. Martin Luther King Jr.'s family survived some pretty serious assassination attempts. There was a bomb that went off in the front yard. There were drive-by shootings of his house a couple of times. I don't remember anymore if it was the FBI or CIA that contacted the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King privately and suggested on the basis of his marital infidelity, which was taboo because he was a Christian minister in the middle of the 20th century, and said in a letter to him, "You should kill yourself." This is the 1950s and 60s equivalent of getting a text message from somebody that says KYS. But they were serious about it, and it was a psyop to remove an undesirable person to the American government for that particular administration. That happened. That's a thing. You can read the letter online. And so forth, right? There's a long list of these pretty uncomfortable topics. But we can talk about these things, and we maybe need to talk about these things, because a person isn't just a learning brain. They're a whole person with a family and a background and hopes and fears and opinions and biases and prejudices that they don't even know they hold. So some of the things that we're going to talk about kind of in the middle to 60% progress point throughout the semester is, how do we do stuff like this? We're going to see how the United States National Park Service culturally and historically interprets United States American concentration camps. Concentration camps are a pretty heavy topic, right? Several million people lost their lives in concentration camps in Europe and in prison camps in all throughout Asia, from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, etc. Well, the United States has run some concentration camps too in the past, and some people are concerned about what look a lot like concentration camps right now, like alligator Alcatraz, if you've heard that term in the news. And this is really important. We're not talking about, man, I don't have a great right to free speech at certain moments in United States history. This is people dying at much higher rates in American concentration camps versus the general population, specifically Japanese people. Okay? So, we go after the whole because these are important things to talk about. We can't forget them because history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it often rhymes. So, if we're not talking about this stuff, were pretty vulnerable to just kind of repeating or rhyming the same ugly, ugly, ugly stories and mistakes that previous generations had to work through. And a lot of people got hurt or lost their lives along the way. Next, interpretation addressed to children, say up to the age of 12. So up to around puberty or through the preteen phase of development. Interpretation addressed to children should not be a dilution of the presentation to adults. We don't dumb it down for kids. Kids are not dumb. They just haven't had the same experience that adults have. Interpretation should, on the other hand, follow a fundamentally different approach. To be at its best, interpretation to children about the same topic, even using the same themes, it's going to require a separate program. So, when we go to Mammoth Cave, there is a wild cave tour for kids. It's hours long, and the parents are not there, and these kids, specifically as a group of kids, go into the cave in a different place and do other stuff than the cave tours that they can go on with their family. Because Freeman Tilden identifies kids view and experience the world in a fundamentally different way before their brains sort of finish cooking and so forth. So, we want to plan for this. Any fully developed Interp program around a series of related topics is going to have more than the number of topics and themes worth of interpretive programs. Maybe kids can experience Interp a lot better through games. Just out of curiosity, show of hands, how many of you guys have ever played card games? Like standard deck of 52 card games, 21, poker, spoons, bullshit, whatever. Okay. How many of you guys have ever played a trading card or collectible card game? More than half the class as well. Okay. How many of you guys were under the age of 18 when you started playing any of those games? There's probably a reason that everybody in the room is raising their hands. We understand we enjoy things differently as kids. So we don't want to shy back from that. We want to lean into it real hard. We'll do a lot of game design exercises in this class. All right, let's see. The sixth principle, and he says in the book, 6 isn't a magic number. This is just what we've come up with so far. And these are pretty broad, high-level, all-encompassing rules, but it's not a magic number. He says his sixth and most important principle sums up all of the others. Perhaps they, his 6 principles, his other 5, could all be telescoped into one: love. That's right, we're talking about love with a weird old professor in a forestry class. What could possibly go wrong? Love in a general sense. Love for your own existence. Okay? If you're not okay and like super emo, like maybe you can meet other folks who are super emo and have some meaningful conversations, right? If your existence is pain, right? Lean into that. You could use that as a way to connect with people through these other principles. Love for people, not specific persons, is why that's worded that way. Love for people, not persons. Love of nature, forestry, and maybe this is more of an acquired love, but a love to communicate. You might say a love to meaningfully connect. Instead of just, hey, sup, or hey, how's it going? Have you guys ever been walking even through the hallways of forestry and you see somebody that you know and they say, how you doing? And you answer, how you doing? Do you think how weird that is? And like you don't even slow down. It's just like, hey, how you doing? How you doing? And you keep on walking, and 15 seconds later, you've completely forgotten that encounter. Because there's no value to it. There's no meaningful love for that other person. It's just somebody you recognize in the hallway from one of your classes or from your frat or whatever. Okay? So this is saying we're going to dispense with all of that right away. We are not just going to ask folks, how you doing, not even listening for an answer. Instead, every word, every gesture, every way that we arrange the group in space. Like, this is a one-to-many power dynamic. What if we were all standing or sitting in a circle eating s'mores right now as I talk? What if each of us was talking before I talk again? Those are different ways to structure interactions. And so we're making conscious choices on, do I arrange the room like a classroom so I can kind of lecture to people? Do I walk in front of the group? Do I walk in the middle of the group? Do I walk behind the group? And they're actually picking their way forward. And we're just talking about we're encountering whatever we encounter as they self-direct their way through the space. Those are all conscious choices. There's not one wrong or right answer. It's just whatever's best for that situation. And that's all sort of captured under the love to communicate. Because we care about our own existence in functional, healthy ecosystems and climates. Because we care about people, humanity. We're not islands. We can't survive all on our own if everybody else is dead and gone. We won't make it real long after that. Because we genuinely love the world around us more than just learning facts about it. And communication is the connecting part that links all of those other loves together in any meaningful or functional way. Okay? So, got 6 principles? All right. That was a 35-minute cold open to class. Any questions so far? Cool. All right, let's jump back into our rules for themes. Now that we know what some of these principles guiding those rules are. Let's see. Okay, so I'm going to review our first couple of principles, and then we'll just catapult right past those into the next ones. All right, so we've talked about what topics are. It's just a word or a noun phrase. And we talked about how the topic is kind of sterile or boring or forgettable. So that's Freeman and Tilden's second principle. It's sterile. And it's just information without any value statement or context. It's textbook information, reference table information, data. We start with that. We start with a real strong foundation on that. Okay? Principle 3 or 4. But we don't just stay right there. We move into our theme, which is a provocative perspective on the topic that is expressed in relation to the visitor everywhere possible. All right, so we've already talked about how your subject is the topic is a single clear thing. Okay? It means we want it to be a little bit more specific than something like Mammoth Cave. There's a million topics inside the super topic, or the uber topic of Mammoth Cave. The card game here has one more specific family of topics, a bunch of specific ecosystem and species endemic to or characteristic of the Mammoth Cave greater ecosystem. Okay, so the subject for the game is, interpretive game about Mammoth Cave, is single and clear. What are the species? How do they interact? How is the ecosystem healthy through that? Okay? Second rule, our verb is an active verb, a storytelling verb, an action verb, and it's not among our list of 22 passive verbs. Be, am, is, are, was, were, been, have, has, had, do, does, did, can, could, will, would, shall, should, may, might, or must. See that list written out here on the next slide. In case you guys didn't catch it last week in your notes, I'm going to make sure to do that. Next rule, there is some clear punctuation needed for the full, complete sentence with its action verb at the end. Is it a question mark? Is it an exclamation point? Exclamation points might be hot takes, as the youth of America might call them today. All right? Question mark or an interrobang
or a period. It's provocative. It's given somebody, all the hearers or the experiencers of this theme, this provocative perspective on the topic, some kind of a, quite frankly, emotional nudge. Maybe the emotion or the sensation is discomfort initially, talking about some of these hard civil rights kind of topics or human rights kind of topics. Maybe the provocation is, this is the most lit thing ever, and the provocation is towards joy instead of discomfort. It can be anything in between, okay? So that's Tilden's principle number 4. Next rule is, should you use figurative language techniques like rhetorical questions? That's using the technique in the point. Get it? Yes. The answer is yes. So, for those of you who hated your high school or junior high English classes, this is going to be a fun and easy section to remind you of, like, what's hyperbole? How can we use that for interpretation to make it more interesting than just reciting a bunch of facts, just regurgitating, vomiting out a bunch of facts? What's metaphor? What's synecdoche? What's a framing narrative? What's an allegory? Or a fable? So, when you listen to a song, songs are very rarely, dry recitations of facts, one after the other in the lyrics. A lot of songs, if you look at the lyrics closely and analyze how they are saying what they're saying, because you get like not a lot of words to convey a complete idea in the song's lyrics, they use a lot of figurative language techniques like metaphor or analogy to have a big response in your brain or your heart to a very small phrase, a single line out of the bars. Okay? Next rule. It's got to have your theme statement to kick off your interp. It has to have attributional language. You, your, us, our, they. It's got to be expressed in relation to somebody or something. And Freeman's first or second, his first principle was whether or not it's in relation to anybody else, like Martin Luther King Jr. It does at least have to be expressed clearly and explicitly in relation to the visitor. We have to understand right from the first sentence, why should I care? Why should I give you this next 2 hours for this cave tour? Is it going to be listening to a cave geologist, like relate crystalline structure of flowstone and geodes and speleothems like stalactites and stalagmites, and super boring and dry? Or is it going to be the most entertaining, engrossing, wild ride I've ever been on? We've got to know that within the first sentence. Everywhere possible, express your theme, your provocation, your perspective on the topic in relation to the visitor that's receiving. So they have anywhere to know where to start. You'll take them through. You're going to be their guide or their companion or their wing person till the end of the experience. But you got to know where to start. Otherwise, man, it's very confusing and kind of uncomfortable for your guests, your participants, your visitors. All right, so recapping for your notes, in case you need them, if you already got this, don't have to recopy it. 22 passive voice verbs. Okay. You have a long-term assignment throughout the semester memorize the 22 helping verbs or passive voice verbs.
other verbs in the human language, tens of thousands of them, are more actiony than these. Okay? So, you're going to hear me using verbs like are. I just did in my last sentence. A lot, because this is a knowledge transfer skill development class. I am teaching you things that are useful or are true. But when we are interpreting, there's that are again. We're telling a story. What happened is an action verb. What happened first? Who slayed, queen, or whatever. Action verbs. Cool. Any questions on these? Just as an exercise, if you guys are ever curious, open up your textbooks, just flip to a random page, and see how many of the verbs in the sentences on a single textbook page are passive voice verbs. Passive voice verbs are the voice of facts and figures and dry, emotionless, valueless factoids without context. Okay? So, your theme is ultimately answering the question, so what? Or why should I care? Provocation helps answer that question. Bless you. And if it helps you to scaffold this, you can record the following fill in the blank. After they experience my interpretation, whether it's a hike, or a campfire talk, or a cave tour, or the Junior Ranger guidebook I just wrote, I want my audience to understand what. And the so what. The what is the topic, and the so what is the why should I care. Okay? Everybody got that? Sick. Take a moment to flip back to your personal list of topics that we wrote out last week. We'll be referring to that list a lot this semester. And pick one thing off of that list. One topic off of that list. We'll just do a quick little in-class exercise here. We're going to do what's called iterative narrowing. We're going to take, typically the topics that we list at the beginning of the semester are pretty big, pretty broad. There's a lot of more specific, maybe more provocative or interesting hot takes or spicy opinions inside of that general topic. We're going to start narrowing down and identifying some of those more useful, more specified topics this way. After they experience my interpretation, I want my audience to understand, just write what's on your list. That's probably a pretty good first cut general topic, whatever it is. If you don't have anything on your list that you're comfortable working with sort of in a small group context here in the class, we can substitute in typical forestry stuff like climate change. That's a useful topic in a whole lot of areas of forestry. There's 1,000,001 topics inside of climate shift, including the choice to call it climate shift, climate change, climate forcing, climate destabilization. That's a choice. Okay? So after you identify that super broad thing, anybody need more time for that? It's okay if you do. You're just filling in the blank with something right off your list. Leave yourself a blank line, and then write again. After they experience this interpretation, I want my audience to understand what's a much more specific aspect of that. a specific clear topic phrase. Instead of climate shift, maybe something like climate shift in southern Illinois forests, bringing new tick-borne illnesses to my doorstep. Okay? So, tick-borne illnesses, zoonotic diseases that can jump from an animal or insect type creature into humans and cause problems. Zoonotic disease. That's a much, much, much more specific in topic, in time, and in place subtopic under climate shift. So, take a couple of minutes and identify one among many more specific, clear topic phrases to complete the same statement. After they experience this interpretation, I want my audience to understand just kind of one thing. Like, you don't have to be a climatologist. We're just biting off one tiny little nibble so we can do awesome with a little bit and connect it to what's important to us, like not dying of Rocky Mountain spotted fever. Summer 2025, to be honest. And list that out. Fill in the blank. Take a minute or two if you need to. If anybody is not real sure how to pick which one to distill down, this is the perfect moment if you're comfortable sharing with the class your general topic. Just bring it up. Have a room full of people here that are pretty smart, as it turns out. And sometimes getting the hard choice to narrow down, it can feel like a hard choice, out of your head into a larger group setting where other folks don't have the same stakes in it, it can help you identify very easily and quickly, with low decision fatigue, a specific clear topic phrase. So, show of hands, who has a much more specific clear topic phrase already filled in? Okay. Anybody who does not yet? Show of hands. Okay. Cool. So, anybody who's still kind of thinking about it, mulling it over, what's your general topic? Open mic.
I got cattle.
Cattle. All right. You grew up on a cattle farm?
I worked on one for 4 years, and then went on dairy farm for a while.
I once knew a cattle rancher who was outstanding in his field. Okay, so let's talk about cattle for a second. What's interesting to you about cattle? Is it the animal husbandry, like raising cattle, bringing them to market? Is it
AI, embryo transfer,
okay.
stuff like that.
Artificial insemination, embryo transfer? What's one piece of AI, that kind of AI, that folks don't know?
I'd say the seeders you gotta put in them.
Okay.
To get them all in sync.
Okay.
Basically, you're syncing your herd by putting the seeder in them. That way, they're all at the same time.
Okay. So, pretty quick. That's a much more specific, interesting topic. Like cattle, you could talk about a million things. Like how delicious they are. Have any of you guys ever seen any of the viral videos of like tapping a cattle's gut to off gas and flame the methane? And it's like a flamethrower? That's wild. That's a thing. And that methane goes somewhere, does something. Means something for us as a society. In the recent even sort of geologic record, we can see as humans domesticate things like aurochs, so precursors to modern domesticated cattle, in our various species. We can see methane concentration rising over the past 10,000 years, specifically tied to cattle and ox animal husbandry. Amazing stuff, right? So through cattle, we can talk about sort of veterinary things, we can talk about food industry things, we can talk about economic stuff, we can talk about, okay, finish this statement. You guys might finally be too young to be a part of this ad campaign from the United States Cattlemen's Association, but beef, it's what's for dinner. How come you remember that? How come you know that? Older than everybody? Somebody thought it was pretty important to have that phrase embedded in your mind and my mind and about 300 million other American minds at that time, a couple of decades ago. Beef, it's what's for dinner. There's an economic piece to that. There's also a cultural piece to that. How many of you guys and gals, non-binary pals, ever saw any of the Star Wars movies? Okay. The original trilogy of Star Wars was at the time the most successful movie trilogy in human history. It's made several people billions of dollars as a franchise over the years. And Star Wars fundamentally, in its structure and in its narrative and all the tropes that it uses, it's in space, it's with laser swords, but it's what genre of movie are the Star Wars movies? You know? Sci-fi, but underneath the sci-fi dressing is, what's the story structure? What are the tropes they use? Anybody know? Hero's Journey. Formatted as a space western. The archetype of Han Solo is not as the pilot of the Millennium Falcon. It's as a cowboy. And cowboys and cow culture and cowboy culture are so deeply embedded in the American awareness of what it means to be a human and what it means specifically to be an American that you can make billions of dollars by adding like bathrobes and laser swords and people breathing heavily through masks and stuff like that. And everybody kind of understands, okay, Han Solo is sort of a rogue character and Luke Skywalker is going through Joseph Conrad's The Hero's Journey. But it's on the frontier of space. And there are lawmen and there are outlaws. And so when you look at, kind of boil down, a whole lot of the most popular movies, I don't know what fraction of them, but many of the top 100 most successful movies in the United States, many of them trace their DNA, so to speak, back to the Western, spaghetti Western, and so forth. Fascinating stuff. Amazing, right? So we can talk about people running around in bathrobes with laser swords as an entry point to talking about cattle. And then from there, really getting what might be interesting or important somehow. The artificial insemination, the seeding, the sinking of a herd. What's that actually, what does it take for you and me to go to Burger King and get a Whopper and not have to think anything about it? And that Whopper tastes exactly the same as it did 25 years ago, anywhere in the United States, across several thousand Burger King locations. It's the same kind of difficulty of making sure every can of Natty Light tastes exactly the same. It's incredibly difficult to do. What if the hops are just a little bit different year after year? My Natty Light doesn't taste the same as it did last time, and it's a little bit off. We've solved those problems, but we have conquered the entire surface of the earth to do that because we love our beef. Because in America, beef is what's for dinner. Yeah. So, you see how I'm taking a general topic and specifying it, and then identifying what's common to all of us, what might be important about syncing or herd and artificial insemination. Maybe aside from the technical details of it, what's culturally important to us? What's recognizable in our sci-fi movies? Because we have the ability to sync up or herd and build part of American, at least dietary or culinary culture around beef. Okay? There's a lot of other topics we can talk about beef. We can talk about the counterfeit Kobe beef with a counterfeit Black Angus market and get into like the beef mafia. Or not. It's a value judgment. What's the most interesting entry point? What's the most provocative entry point into this? Okay? Cool. All right. Anybody else? Anybody else not at the specific, clear topic phrase point yet? Okay. Are you comfortable sharing a topic, or we can go with a general one? Okay, cool. Let's go with climate change then. Just as an example, you don't have to care about this, but climate shift in southern Illinois forests, bringing new tick-borne illnesses to my doorstep. Or, as we might say in our next sentence, after they experience this interpretation, I want my audience to understand not just this idea that tick habitat ranges are expanding into and across southern Illinois, but the Centers for Disease Control, before they had major funding cuts late last year, were tracking more than a dozen, almost 24 tick-borne illnesses for humans in southern Illinois, some of which have devastating consequences and are very, very hard to fully cure. Some of them are even hard to identify or diagnose in a particular patient. How can we take this specific topic and make it a little bit spicier or more provocative? A little bit of a harder nudge from the perspective that it expresses. Let's all brainstorm together. Not to my doorstep, but to your doorstep. There's one piece. What else? We could add some value language, like good, bad, problematic. It's a popular one these days. Ticks in southern Illinois are marauding pretty badly, and it's getting worse. Your backyard. See how that's a slightly more provocative sense of things? They're not just existing, they're marauding. So, I use the verb are as a compound verb with an action verb. Are marauding. That's okay. You can use is action verb, are action verb, something like that. That's an okay pattern. But not the ticks are in southern Illinois. So, what's some other ways we could make it kind of a spicy or provocative statement or question or exclamation on the topic of ticks and disease bearing?
Like the permanence of the disease, like this can't be cured or something like, or I don't know if that's true. Like talk about the effects of what it actually does.
Okay. It goes something like, I like that. That's good.
Yeah, because I didn't care so much about ticks until I heard that you could always be allergic to red meat or something like that.
Alpha galactose out?
Yeah, because I heard, and my cousin got Lyme disease, and that he's just always got it.
to live for the rest of your life.
You will never be the same.
Yeah.
But is will one of those words that we can use?
If it's with an action verb, you can pair them together. It's just a helping verb at that point. That's fine. We're telling a story, we're implying, we're stating some kind of action or sequence or something more than just dry fact without any context. Don't want to have ticks wreck your life forever? Question mark? Let's talk about ticks. Pollen exchange in your own backyard.
You're gonna have possums doing it too.
Possums. Why possums are
That's
heroes?
how much ticks they do, yeah. So it's like if you don't wanna, I guess how'd you start that off? That's
What, wreck your life forever or something like that? Or wreck your health?
it's like give the possums a break, like traffic sign. Like roadkill free day for possums.
The action verb there is give. Give possums a break. Transactions, a sequence, it's a little story in half of a sentence. Pretty compact. Instead of possums are great for less tick issues. Okay, I believe you, but I don't care.
Could be a lot of people that would stigma against possums.
Yeah.
Just cause like your appearance.
Okay. Here's an interesting late Gen Z, early Gen Alpha challenge for you. See if you can come up with a theme, sentence, statement, question, exclamation, whatever, that uses the word it. Talk about it. Honest challenge. Can you do that? Use it properly in a sentence. Cute. Yeah. Okay. That feels like something a ranger would say, doesn't it? It doesn't feel like something a professor would say. And that's good, because professors are boring. We want to break out of that mold that our teachers and professors have been low-key, as the youth say, forming us into our entire education career so far. Cool. So we can use slang. We can even use a little bit of jargon if it's very clear to like sixth grade reading level what that jargon is. We can't make any assumptions about anybody else's level of training or if English is even their first language or what have you. So, yeah. You see where we're going with this? Okay. Cool. So on a fresh sheet of paper, totally fresh sheet of paper, set with 3 notes. You don't necessarily have to transcribe this fill in the blank boilerplate stuff. You don't have to rewrite after they experience this interpretation. I want my audience to understand. But give me your name, a general topic, one that I've supplied or one off your list that you're comfortable me seeing and you working with for the next couple class sessions. Give me the general and vague topic, phrase, noun, or word. Let's give a line or two. And give me the specified, more clear, more scoped down, hopefully more interesting topic phrase. Give a couple of lines and write what is that complete theme sentence that you've come up with. If you don't love your first attempt on your theme sentence, don't worry, there's a million ways we could dress up any of these topics into a functional theme that checks all of those 6, 7, or 8 rules that we put together. Clear subject, action verb, punctuated, expressed in relation to the visitor using attributional language like you, your, we, us, our, they, so on down our list. If you've got one pretty well squared away, see if you can write a second different one. For the climate, one that's talking about possums as an entry point to talking about tick-borne illness, as an entry point to talking about climate change in your backyard. And a separate one that uses the word ick. And so this process is all designed to take a lot of the decision fatigue out of figuring out what topics you want to go after, because you can just list a bunch of broad topics, and then for each of those topics you can list one or several, maybe even lots of more specific things underneath that, right? So cattle insemination, seeding, timing, synchronizing a herd versus cowboy culture versus sci-fi westerns. Those of you who are familiar with the Firefly franchise, that has a rabid fandom. Now, they're not actually suffering from rabies. That's a metaphor. But when we talk about Firefly, we talk about how. I can use one as the entry point to the other. So we're chunking. We're taking potentially big or intimidating or hugely unbounded or overwhelmingly huge and complex general topic, and just chunking it down until we get to one useful sentence. Taking kind of the sting out of this critical task. Now the reason that we're spending a whole class session on writing one sentence, or getting to one sentence from Freeman Tilden's 6 very broad principles of interp, is because this theme is the first statement, question, or interrogative, or exclamation that people or participants encounter, readers or type participants, whatever. And so if this gets off on the wrong foot, metaphorically, then the rest of the interp is going to be maybe confusing or alienating or off-putting or outright offensive. We provoke too hard or in a wrong direction. So these themes are pretty important, but neither do they have to be super intimidating. We're just picking a topic, specifying it, dressing it up with a sentence, making clear perspective, provocation, punctuation, its relationship to the reader, the experiencer, the participant. Okay. So a big chunk of the content of this class are scaffolds or workflows like this, so that whatever the topic is, clearly I don't care about which topics you pick for this class. What I do care a lot about is making you functional in taking that topic, making it really useful to you as an entry point for your interp. Okay? All right, give me some feedback. How are you guys doing on this? Scale of 1 to 5. How are we feeling confidence-wise on this? Like 0, 1, 2, 3, or Park, you're going way too slow. I get it. We can move on. Or is this like a, I feel like I'm smelling what you, the Rock Dr. Park, are cooking, but I'm not sure if I really got it yet, or I have no idea, am I even in the right class? How do magnets work? Everybody? How we doing? Scale of 1 to 5. 4? Okay. 6. Alright. This count goes to it. 4. 4. Cool. Perfect. I'm happy with that. Alright. Let's start packing up slowly. Our assignment for Monday's class is gonna be to come back with this exercise that we've done 3 times. It can be 3 at the same general topic, it can be 3 completely different ones. Bring each one to the point of at least one fully rules compliant theme statement, or question, or exclamation. And bring those in for Monday. Sound good? Okay. Cool. So if you lean into the technique of narrowing down, it's like what? 10-minute assignment, it's not that heavy. But if you would pass in the 1-pager with today's set, so I give you credit for your hard work and learning. Make sure your name's on it. Come around for questions if you have them. We'll let a couple minutes early. All good? Cool. I appreciate you guys. This is like high concept work. And if I'm not coming up with the right ways to specify your beloved topics, push back, okay? If you want to talk about cattle and you don't like Star Wars, say Dr. Carter, let's take it another direction. I'm going to do that, okay? Because these are things you care about. So I don't want to take it in any direction. I want to help you take it to a direction that's useful and functional, interesting, and challenging for you. See you next time.